So let's get started. So in terms of modern SDLC and DevOps, what I'm showing on the screen, and you'll recognize these at the top from left to right, essentially the high-level phases or different stages for delivering software, delivering value to customers. From the time that we create a plan on the far left to the time that we deliver and then constantly monitor that delivery in the hands of our customers on the far right. To accommodate all these different phases and stages that are inherent to most organizations, to most teams that are doing software development, there are quite a good number of solutions in the marketplace for each of these different and very specific items in that workflow, in that SDLC. You will recognize some of these names right away. These are really great tools for what they do. The challenge, though, becomes trying to coordinate and build a solution that from beginning to end, from planning to delivery and monitor, interacts with itself. Each of these applications, as I mentioned, provides a specific set of functional capabilities. To be effective, they're part of that larger, complex, interconnected environment. And with such a degree of complexity, there is a high cost of ensuring that each and every one of these pieces are working well. And such complexity, unfortunately, slows down the pace of delivering value to the market, our users and customers. The absolute proof or the absolute measure that we want to make sure that we're tracking is that of cycle time. And working software is when it's in the hands of a customer and they're using that. So with this in mind, understanding that there's all these different tools that are addressing different parts of that SDLC, let's talk about GitLab. Most of you may still think of GitLab as simply a great Git repository solution, a Git SCM, but we do much more than that. And I'm going to show you. Let's go through that flow from left to right, from planning all the way to monitoring. And actually, before I do that, let's switch over to my application. Let's talk about planning, that high-level stage, because I mentioned that we're going to be talking about each and every one of those stages. In terms of planning, what I'm showing you on the screen currently is our GitLab.com instance, the largest Git deployment. This is the GitLab.com that serves hundreds of thousands of projects and thousands of users and developers. What I'm showing you here are the specific instances of GitLab that we are using internally. Some of these instances, each of these are projects, are public, as in the case of, let's say, that top one at the top. What that means is that individuals across the globe can access and see what we're working on. They can see which issues we're tracking, and certainly that level of transparency allows us as an organization to get input from the community at large, and that enables us to grow and develop and address specific requests much faster. These different repos not only represent software projects, application projects. As you can see here, say in the case of some of these items for, let's say, blog posts, for GitLab design, we're using these for much more than just software repos. And this is the case with many of our customers, whether they're doing sales, whether they're doing marketing, capturing assets, mockups, marketing campaigns, account management. GitLab enables all these different types of users and organizations. For planning purposes, let's take a peek into the Enterprise Edition repo. This is it. This is the repo itself. This is the source code that we're using to deliver and develop our Enterprise Edition of GitLab, whether using that in the cloud or on premises. The repo itself here is where we track our issues. So thinking about agile project management and what I will call a lightweight type of agile project management, because we move really fast, this is our backlog of items. The labels that you see across any of these issues help us identify quickly whether these are at a specific stage in part of the delivery workflow, whether these are pertaining to a specific function in the application from a business side, etc. That allows you to be very specific about what we're tracking, how we're tracking it as well. So this is overall our backlog. It is not a backlog without shape. We do use milestones, we do use epics, we do use releases. So we also associate any decisions to an appropriate context to make sure that we're tracking against that context. That agile principle of having your big visible charts and tracking mechanisms for any given project in the system, you can create one board or many boards. These boards allow you to create workflows for your teams, much in the manner of a Kanban board or a Scrum board, to track their work, whether through a project, through a single iteration. From a Kanban perspective, being able to use a pull method for working through items. In this case, this particular board is doing functional type tracking. We want to make sure that we understand very quickly, very briefly, at a very high level, which items are part of our functional deliverables. And for each of these projects, we have quite a few boards. So an organization can start to create as many boards as they need to. Even individual boards at the user level, where I filter and be very specific about the types of items that I need personally, whether for myself or for my media team, to display on that visual radiator. Because we're tracking these types of boards, say at project level, you can certainly do this at a higher level, say from a group level perspective. If I'm an organization that has a number of different business units, each of them tracking their own projects, I can create groups, as in the case of GitLab.org, and through that larger group, track projects or even subgroups and have appropriate corresponding boards to that end. Still in terms of planning, in terms of agile project management, epics allow us to create and capture the high-level strategic type initiatives or items, something that we wouldn't easily deliver within a single project, within a single iteration, but really that are more long-lived, that may span a number of releases, that may span a longer time frame. Let me show you an example of one of the epics that we're currently tracking. And this is for our 10.4 release, which is out due in a few days on the 22nd. Within that larger epic in GitLab, I'm capturing the definition of the strategic elements that we are to deliver. And having made that explicit to my audience, to my different groups within the organization, we have created a number of issues to track against that epic. Completing these issues is going to provide a completion to that epic once we accomplish all of these. I mentioned the usage of milestones. We're still thinking about planning. Let me go back to GitLab Enterprise Edition. Milestones in the system allow us to create context against which we're going to track specific deliverables. That context being a start and end date for a project, a start and end date for a sprint. In this case, these are our monthly releases. These are a couple of the ones that we have delivered in the recent past, say 10.0. As we capture items, as we managed items within that backlog and decided that we wanted these to go out by that due date for the 10.0 release, within that milestone, we tracked all the issues. And remember, our issues are our user stories, our feature requests, our bugs, our enhancements. As we're going to see in the demonstration in just a few minutes, any code that is committed, that is associated to those issues, also is tracked against that milestone as well. So we have a very specific construct that allows us to track all these different data points and make sure that we're delivering, and also make sure that we can have very clear visibility into what we are delivering and who the participants of that delivery are. Very briefly, I've talked about how GitLab.com, how GitLab, let's say for this particular Enterprise Edition project, how we're tracking our work through the use of our own repository in our GitLab.com offering. Let's be more specific. I'm going to switch over to my little project. I'm showing you a different project. This is called a Ruby app. It's a fictional, simple application. Honestly, all it does is display a web page and a hello world message. This specific project, as we have talked before, is part of a larger group. So Atomic Lab in this case is our group, and my Ruby app is one of the projects within that group. I'm playing the role of a dev team lead in this particular project. And looking at our environments, let me take you there. We currently have two environments, one for staging and one for production. At any given point, we can spin up additional environments where needed, for example, for reviewing code that is currently in flight. In the case of what's currently in production, this is that simple message that I mentioned, hello world, on a gray background. The name of the project, the name of this simple app is called the Ruby app. So with that in mind, gray doesn't really fit the context of our app itself. And to be sure, I created an issue to make sure that we address that color scheme. Perhaps we were doing some refactoring, perhaps we were applying some temporary experimental color schemes as we try to fine-tune our corporate messaging. But in this case, we want to go back to red, and gray is not the color that we need out there for in our production instance. The issue that you're looking at here, I created with really trying to make use of as many as would be meaningful attributes that you can capture within an issue. Certainly when doing planning, when doing that type of project management, you want to have as much information and defined as granularly and specifically as possible to make sure that the audience, in this case, the rest of the development team, understands what is to be accomplished. The business value here is make sure that our customers who are using our application understand our proper messaging and that the user experience is consistent, in this case, with that color red background. I have some tasks associated to some individuals on our marketing side, on our tech writing side, and certainly additional tasks that we want to make sure that we check off as we complete this particular item. My code fix suggestion to my development team is change the background color to the dark red, which is more in line with our Ruby app. Because also we may be thinking in terms of, say, as delivering a new feature, making sure that the workflow for our users, that user experience, is well mapped out. So I put in some workflow diagrams to guide the development of this feature, likely with collaboration from developers. So we're thinking about agile best practices. And I wanted to make sure that our developers saw this. If they were not aware currently, this is what's out in production, that hello world with that dark gray background, and we want to change that. I have made some preliminary assignments. My developer, Aidan, is currently going to be working on this one item. It's not associated to an epic or a milestone. He's going to be doing a level of time tracking to make sure that we have some numbers behind the effort that is being spent on this one item. Our due date is today. Let's make sure that we get through this as quickly as possible. And I'm tracking it in terms of the labels themselves. It's a bug, I think. It is dev only. Nothing else required from our customers right now. And we're doing some relative sizing. So compared to other items in our backlog, it's a 2. Not too big. I believe that this is right depending on the types of changes that have to be done at the code level. So that's me, the dev team lead, having entered one item in our backlog as part of that planning process, that ideation process. Let's go to a different browser. This is Aidan, that developer to whom I assigned that issue. Aidan, here, looking at his instance of GitLab, notices he has a to-do. Something has been assigned to him. Something has been asked of him. Going to that list first, this is the item. This is the one issue that has been assigned to Aidan, the one that we just reviewed a moment ago. Because I mentioned it also, Aidan knows that he has that to do, and in this case, it's due today. We have different mechanisms to make sure that all team members have full visibility, full transparency into not only the work, but any updates that involve them, in this case being an assignee and or a participant in an issue. Aidan reviews the issue, in this case, understands what the change needs to be done, change this to that suggested red color. From the issue itself, as that developer, I'm going to start working on this one item. And I'm going to create a merge request. Creating the merge request directly from the issue allows me to create that branch from our master branch, work on my code specifically in that branch without affecting the work of other developers and certainly what is out there in production currently. And it also provides us with a mechanism for tracking the work within a single asset. The issue was part of a plan. Now the merge request associated to the issue is going to help us address that issue, and certainly have anyone else that needs to collaborate on that merge request provide us their input, their follow-ups, their comments. Having created that merge request, now we're not on the issue as we were a moment ago. We're in the merge request itself. This is a merge request. And the merge request has been named as per my configuration. Certainly, this is something that is up to any organization, how they name their branches. In this case, this is work in progress to resolve that one issue. Having addressed this one issue, or this code fix is going to close that issue. And as part of the information that I have readily available on the merge request, having created that branch, remember, I haven't done anything to the code itself. Now I have my specific branch is going to build a review app, a temporary environment within which I'm going to be doing my code development. It's going to be available for testing. It's going to be available for review without impacting other environments such as staging and certainly not production. Because that review app is already building, I'm going to have some ready metrics right off the bat. In this case, as you can see on my screen, I have a notes on production. So far, nothing has impacted, nothing has impacted our production environments. There might be some slight increases and decreases in memory in my new review app. Let's start coding. And from here, I'm going to go directly to my branch. I'm looking now at the code within that branch. This is my repo, specifically the server RV file is what I need to modify. Normally, as a developer, I work from the command line. I work in my own environment through my own IDE. So locally, that branch is now available locally to me. Given that we have limited time, I'm just going to do the edit very briefly from the web UI. Specifically, the color is this. Slate gray needs to be dark red. I don't believe there's anything else. Very simple change. That's my commit message for this particular code change. And what happens now, once again, because we have all the different components within this single solution working together, I am now building this code, committing this new code to my review app, which is part of a pipeline in our CI and CD configuration. Let me show you what that means. Let's go back to our merge request. This is the same request we were looking at a moment ago. Now there's an actual code commit, there's an actual code change. My pipeline is running. It's currently in the test stage. As you can see also within the merge request, and this is part of our code review in GitLab, I require one more approval. Code approvals or approvals on a merge request and code commits can be very granular. In this case, I'm using just one other individual to make sure that he reviews my code, that he makes the correct notes, and that if it's successful, that we've pushed that out to later stages of development. But you can be very granular. You can assign more than one approver, certainly. You can assign specific named approvers, perhaps also some approvers that belong to different functional groups. So those approvals can also apply on a per group basis. We're going to make sure that you have the correct checks in place for your governance and code review models, and ensure that every code commit that needs to go out there has been vetted by the appropriate individuals. I'm going to jump into the pipeline itself to show you what is currently being executed. Within this pipeline, we're going through the build, test, documentation, review, and thereafter we're going to go through cleanup stages all the way out to staging and production. As you can tell in the test stage, what is currently executing, I have a number of automated tests. that run as part of that test stage or test phase in my CI. In this case, I'm using or I'm taking advantage of the usage of runners to run these tests in parallel versus having to wait for one test to end while the other executes. Our runners allow us to execute jobs within a configuration file, in this case, running the specific automated tests, once again in parallel. My runners can be dedicated runners to my project or shared runners across projects, basically runners that execute a job and then wait for another job to be available for them. Or I can destroy the runners after execution to make sure that I'm managing my resources effectively. Let me show you the configuration file for this particular pipeline. In my repository, my YAML file, my GitLab CI YAML file, is where we have defined the pipeline for this particular project for the Ruby app. Remember, I'm just a small project within a larger organization, within a larger group. Those may have different ways of managing their pipelines, different stages, and certainly they may be using different Docker images. For the intent of this particular project, we created an image in our local Docker registry. That image contains all the files or the libraries that we need to execute the Ruby app to deliver and deploy it. We're also taking advantage of a local Kubernetes cluster. So we're using Kubernetes as our as our container scheduler. And this is where I define those stages that you saw in that pipeline, from top to bottom, in the order in which I want them to execute. Some of these are automated, some of these require manual action. Our developers have superpowers, but we have other members of the teams that need to do some vetting before we can move, say, from a staging or from a review environment all the way up to production. So those are where my manual steps come in. And for each of these stages, I may have, or I may also define additional scripts and additional parameters and variables to run every time that we build our code. In the case of automated testing, I'm using code quality to validate my code, how clean it is, syntax, legibility, anything that may not be, for example, styled as well, anything that may not be clean, that we don't want to go out to production with. Additional tests here may include, for example, Selenium Cucumber tests. And some of these tests here, as you can tell, are mocked, given the short time that we have for our conversation today. But I do have an automated test here for static application security testing. This is going to run on my code during that testing phase and ensure that there are no vulnerabilities on our code that we're building. So my YAML file here is where we are doing all that pipeline staging and orchestration. Let's go back to the pipeline that is running, and by now it should have completed. If there are any failures, we can certainly check in on that. For example, let's say that looking at that pipeline at the top that just passed through all those different stages, let's say that at any of these steps that the pipeline fails. At that point, and I don't believe that I have any fail currently, we can certainly go into that pipeline through its execution or maybe after the fact and check in to see specific errors and specific outputs that would give us a clue as to why maybe the pipeline didn't pass, why the pipeline was stalled, or something like that. And from that perspective, retry the pipeline again if we believe that the error may have been resolved already. So the code is ready. The code has been, the code is now made available in our merge request. It's visible to the person who first submitted this issue, in this case, our dev team lead. And this is our review environment, the temporary environment where I mentioned the code was built. It's ready there for additional testing. I can continue to modify my code using that same review app until we get it right. Let's jump right into that. Hello world with a dark red background. I believe this is what our dev team lead wanted. Let's make a comment and let's make sure that we go through that review process. From the merge request, I'm drilling into the specific commit as a developer. These were my changes here. And I'm going to mention our dev team lead. This should be the correct CSS color code. Looks good in the review app. Okay, so because I made this comment here, certainly our dev team lead now is going to get that notification, that to do in his own instance of GitLab, as we saw here earlier. And because he is one of our approvers as well, he needs to go through that code review and resolve that discussion, resolve that conversation before we can move on with the fix. There's something that I noticed here as well. And I pointed out a couple of our automated tests in that GitLab configuration file. Notice that on the merge request, because we are running those checks with each and every commit, we notice some inconsistencies and vulnerabilities as well from a code quality perspective. As you can see here, some items that are really pertaining more to style, not as much with syntax, but certainly with style here. And our code quality, in this case, it has degraded 2 points. We do have the ability in this case of doing some self-healing. So as you can tell, we already addressed those inconsistencies with that code quality check. But what's most important though, at least in the sense of what I'm trying to push out there to our users at some point, is our security vulnerabilities. And our static application testing has noted that there's at least 3 vulnerabilities currently in place that we should take a look at before we go out with this version of the code. Code review. We've looked at coding in GitLab with that very simple example. We looked at the merge request itself, committing the work, using review apps as temporary environments for validation of that code, for additional testing. On the testing side, I showed at least 2 automated tests that were run for code quality and static application testing. Certainly many more you can build in there. Now let's talk about code review. I just moved back to my browser where I'm that team lead. And I'm going to go to that merge request. On my to-dos list, Aidan, our developer, mentioned me, so this is ready to go. I can go and do my checks on that specific part of the code. In the merge request itself, I'm going to go to the commit and then look at the comments made on that commit as per our developer. So this is what was changed within that code. I'm going to go and check the environment. And I know that going through all these steps sequentially may be a little bit boring. Certainly, boring is not a bad thing. Given that we are doing all the work for many of these complex applications, keeping it as simple as possible is what you need. This is the background that I was expecting. This is exactly the color scheme that we want our users to see. Aidan has done the work pretty quickly, addressed that one issue. Let's go with this. I'm going to say it looks good on this end. I'm going to comment. At this point, I could also resolve that discussion, which gives us an additional step in that review process. Certainly making comments and saying this looks good, or perhaps resolving that merge request as a whole is valuable because we are doing the process of checking back and forth until we are satisfied with the code. Discussions here provide us that additional step. We may look at the code itself from a high-level perspective, but if there are questions, if there's anything else that has been measured within the code edits as well, we can also set the system to force us to resolve those discussions before we go forward with code approvals. I think this looks good to go on the code itself, but if I may make a comment to Aidan, let's review the SAS results. I don't like it that we found vulnerabilities. In this manner, we're going to keep going back and forth and make sure that within that single merge request. If there's anything else that we need to address, if there's additional code that needs to be reviewed or committed, that we also address that, and that we also have that full understanding and sign off before we move forward. To keep things simple in this case, I've looked at the code online. I may go back and forth with Aidan here to resolve the issues that were brought up by our static testing. Let's just say that I have gone through that process. I'm going to approve the code, say signaling that end to our code review. And remember, this can be as stringent as you need to, with multiple approvers, with multiple sign-offs. I'm also going to resolve that work in progress status. Checks have always, must always be in place. We'll be pushing that to our customers, must work and must work well every time. And lastly, I'm going to merge. Having done that merge for the pipeline itself, now we've gone from that automated part of a pipeline, which was doing our building, our testing, putting that environment out there for different functional groups to look at and make sure that we had their input. Now, in that role that allows me to make a decision, given all those different sign-offs and approvals, to push the code out there to a later environment, the pipeline itself is going to start building towards our staging environment. I merge the code. Let's look at the pipeline. And let's look at our environments. I should now have a staging environment. It may take just a moment to build. That is showing the brand new code that was just pushed, that was approved, and that was pushed now from that review to our later environments. As we talk about, say, now doing that final push to those environments that are, in the case of staging, maybe available to additional review or inspection, say by our QA teams, by some of our early adoption customers. For any of the environments, have the ability to quickly jump into the environment itself. This has not refreshed just yet. And have the ability also to monitor the impacts that that environment is having to our production fleet. In this case, you have heard me talk about Docker, about Kubernetes. We are working with a cloud-native type project, so everything is cloud-based, and we are, in this case, deploying to that web application. So I want to make sure that whatever changes I make do not have a negative impact on what we currently have out there in our fleets, both in those pre-production stages and in the final production stage. I can tell right now that, there you go, I had a small blip. Very quickly, I jumped into the staging environment to look at some of the metrics in terms of response, in terms of latency, and throughput. Remember, this is a web app, so these are the metrics that are important to me for this particular application. Because we're using Kubernetes, I'm also tracking system metrics for our Kubernetes cluster. If we're deploying a large amount or a large number of different pods and containers, we're going to make sure that the performance remains consistent throughout and that we're not degrading in any way. Let me check on my environment again. It has not updated just yet, so I may have some something to fix on that backend. And as I look at my review environment and moving forward with that environment out to staging, Lee, from our audience, are there any questions that need to be answered, anything that we need to stop for?
Sure. I have one for you here. Dan had asked if we could show a group board and also some kind of other types of boards, maybe like a board used for marketing or blogs. I don't know if you have one handy, but I figured that would be something you could check out. I love those for you.
Definitely, thank you. Let me check on that. So I just moved back to the Enterprise Edition, and let's go to the GitLab.org group. At this level, let's look at a board here. So the board here is going to look at the common labels that we have across the issues that are part of projects that belong to this high level group. As you can see here, I have some I have the work configured so that I can see tags that show me the work that is currently development in review as well. From this perspective, we mentioned this briefly, but I can certainly have more boards at this level that are very specific, in this case, as you see, to our strategic type initiatives and deliveries over the next number of months, over the next number of releases. Each of these boards would be specific, it would have been configured in the way that provides us that information that we intend to for that specific purpose. And from here, I would also add additional filtering options to truly drill down into the specific items that are of interest to me if I'm reviewing the board or I'm using this board for inspection or conversations. Let's look, for example, at a board for planning. Let's say for discussion, 10.5 would be our March deliverable. So these are the items that we're currently tracking as part of a discussion thread. And you can see that a couple of the data points for these discussion threads are bugs and performance. For Dan, Lee, let me know if this real brief and quick overview helps address that question.
Sure, I'll keep an eye out in the chat for Dan's update, but I think you did, so we'll go from there. Dan was wondering if you have a non-tech example. I'm not sure if you have access to the blog team, what they've been doing there, but they are available on GitLab.com, Dan. So you could take a look and just go to the GitLab-com group, and you'll see what our marketing team's doing, all of that stuff. And you could just take a look at those boards and see them in action.
Lee, Emily, Erica, I am back. I had a blip for a moment.
No sweat.
You're about to see my desktop.
Yep, I just walked Dan through and told him how he can find on GitLab.com. He can find some of our other boards and see some live examples there. And there's one other question in the chat that I'm taking a look at here. Okay. So Devashis wants to know more about the runners. How to access child runners. Please let me know how to access workspace where the actual code gets deployed. So depending on your setup, I'll take a quick second to talk about this, Victor, and then you could show some more stuff too and fill in some blanks. So depending on your setup, how you're using your runners may deploy code, and there may be a step that deploys code, but you would have full control over how the CI runner does that. The runner itself, you could set up using, it could be powered by many different technologies under the hood, but the runner itself is just a machine running Docker and then running those Docker containers there. So the thing that I would say is, in the case of using CI with GitLab, you can use a CI runner to deploy code. You can use Kubernetes to do more advanced things with DevOps and whatnot, like Victor has been showing some examples here of more advanced CI opportunities. So Victor, I'll turn it over to you and see if you have any more to add there regarding CI deployments.
Thanks, Lee. And for our member of the audience who asked that question, I would ask if that was helpful. I think at a very high level, Lee, you just answered it expertly, as you always do.
Haven't seen any follow-up from them yet, so we'll give them another minute, but we'll see if there are any other questions.
As we wait for additional questions, remember we will make some minutes available at the end for more questions as well. My environment finally made it through production. And for what it's worth, I'm actually using a real live instance. It's not a GitLab.com instance, but it is an instance in the cloud. So certainly, as all the members of my team are running through presentations and demonstrations and so on, usage may also impact how swiftly we move through this. Staging now has the code that I intended, our hello world in dark red. We're using a canary deploy type strategy to push this code from staging to our production pods. But what Canary does, it allows us to have this new code out there in production and have our users start hitting it. We've done through our functional testing, through our automated testing, and by all intents and purposes, it's good to go. But having it in production gives us that one extra step, one extra validation that what we have done is truly, in this case, with the Ruby app, delighting our customers. Having deployed that staging code to our canary port in our production environment, as you can see here, I'm keeping it simple. One production pod and one canary pod. Canary currently has that dark red background. That means that as users hit the production environment, their real-life application, through a load balancer, they might be hitting one or the other, the previous production code or the brand new code that is in Canary. What I'm doing right now is doing a quick refresh to see if I can hit the previous code. Right now it's directing me to Canary, which is okay. Having done that final validation, the final step through Canary, if nothing else, if we haven't found anything that is counterproductive or that truly does not validate what we're trying to do with a new code, then we can do the final push to production, in which case that does away with the canary pods and production sees the latest and greatest. Now that we have an environment out there in production for our users, let's talk a little bit about monitoring. And certainly we've talked a little bit about monitoring, say, at the environment level, when we showed some of the graphs coming from our production environment and our Kubernetes cluster. In terms of additional reporting, say, in terms of charts, we have access for our project itself on our continuous integration reporting. Our commits, our pipelines, our successes, our success ratio as well over time. We don't have as much activity here as you would see, say, on our GitLab.com instances. But certainly metrics that, particularly for our ops team, are going to be of value, understanding because they're maintaining our fleet, because they're maintaining the infrastructure in our environments, see how much code we're pushing out there, how much successes we're having, and for those successes or for those failures that we're having out there, make sure that we have, or that we're taking measures to correct whatever the problem may be. From a repository level, and maybe I'll switch over briefly to GitLab.com. Let's go back to Enterprise. Let's look at some of the charts. In this case, for our Ruby app, I'm just using Ruby. It's a very simple application, just one language, one code base there. But with a chart on the repository, you can see that here we have a bigger distribution of what we are currently working with in the repo. Different languages, commit statistics. And because we want to make sure that we track the activities that are taking place, we have reporting in terms of not only audit logs, such as the activity coming from our developers themselves, from all the contributors to the project, with very granular visibility into who did what, and the ability to drill down into detail. Push events, merge events, all the way down to the team, which teams are contributing what to the code. Cycle analytics. I mentioned at the beginning of our conversation that cycle time is one of our most crucial metrics. How quickly can we deliver value, once again, working software to our users? And in that speed, not only are we tracking the speed itself, but we're tracking the quality. So with cycle analytics, we can see per stage, as part of our, once again, idea to production type workflow, our overall high-level SDLC and DevOps flow. How long is it taking us to go to different aspects of that flow? And all this information we would filter pertaining to a specific interest in different metrics. It's taking a moment to reload. As you can imagine, this is a large instance, and there's a lot of activity going in all the time. So there you have it. We finished in GitLab Enterprise Edition where we started. I took you to, and I called it boring. Hopefully it wasn't too much of a boring example, but we went all the way from creating an issue and managing an issue in the backlog through the stages of committing code, editing code, having review environments, doing testing, all the way out to production. If you think about it, we went through from left to right each of these different stages. Once again, these are really good tools represented here, but we did it all within a single application. And the power of that single application, that single platform, is that the focus is not on integration. The focus is on creating, on delivering value. The focus is on shortening your feedback cycles. You don't have to be worrying about which application to upgrade, which application to configure again, which plugins to maintain. The developer certainly, with that single interface, have a single place, a single source of truth, whether it's from the planning perspective or from the code perspective. And of much value, of ultimate value, is the ability to scale. GitLab.com would be our prime example of that scale. I mentioned we're tracking hundreds of thousands of projects with, I really don't have a count, but likely the same number of users, concurrent users who are constantly committing and managing code. Now, that being said, we are that single platform that can accomplish all this. That being said, we can certainly integrate with the best of any in that particular workflow. So if you are doing a Agile project management with Jira or other tools, we integrate with them. Jenkins certainly has been in the CI space for quite a while. We can integrate very well with Jenkins, with really hundreds of other existing applications. And through APIs, we can also produce and deliver new integrations and new interactions between tool sets with GitLab. Some of the features that I showed today, the capabilities in our application, were enterprise level. Some are available in our starter edition as well. Some are premium. But in any case, for organizations, GitLab is a tool for the enterprise. And there's these three different key components that are part of why a solution like GitLab really is valuable. Say, from the aspect of security, providing authentication options, for example, integration to LDAP, but not only LDAP, but also within LDAP groups, group filters to be very specific and very granular in access control. The auditing of all activities that happen in GitLab, as you saw through some of our cycle analytics. And certainly also at the code level, granular permissions to control how the code is managed and deployed. Certainly developers will have access to a project, but perhaps not everyone will have the same level of access to some branches and some aspects of that code. Scale is important. We mentioned this just a moment ago. Organizations need to support maybe not just hundreds, but thousands of users. With GitLab Geo, you can create globally distributed read-only mirror nodes of a GitLab instance, which allows team members that are non-co-located in different parts of the world to have ready access to an instance of GitLab and be able to start working. No need to wait for their commits or the pushes to go back to a central server somewhere else. With Geo comes high availability. It comes with, we have also those disaster recovery options for database replication of Git repositories in the event of a disaster situation. And with disaster recovery, a quick failover that does not have too much of an effort. Lee has been on the line answering questions during the conversation so far. So with that enterprise level of support, you have Lee, one of our support leaders, being able to provide that expert assistance. And we have a good number of other additional support team members that are located throughout the world that have SLAs in place to make sure that we address issues for our enterprise customers in a very timely fashion. I won't go into all of the items on this bullet list, but suffice it to say, I mentioned, and you might remember, that we deliver new releases on a monthly cadence every 22nd of the month. So we move fast, and with the links that you see here, you can have quick visibility into not only what we've done, but also what's coming up next and our vision as well. One of the features that is very notable here, the first one under the present header, Auto DevOps. Everything that I showed you today as part of that pipeline, the pipeline definition, the configuration, the different stages, and so on, can be done automatically. No need to code it or to create it yourself. What Auto DevOps does is basically, whenever you create a project using Heroku build packs, we detect the languages that you're using in your project. And with that, we provide you with optimal configurations for being able to build, review, test, and deploy your code with minimal effort. The new feature here is in terms of future releases, and if you can, please do check on these links. There are some what I believe are exciting features coming up across our different editions, but particularly in the Enterprise and the Ultimate editions. And please look at our vision as well, because this is not where it stops, not that single platform for everything. We certainly are ambitious, and we intend to do much more. Hopefully what I've showed you so far has been helpful and valuable. By all means, that we have a few minutes left. Let us know if there's any additional questions, and Lee, anything that I should address, let me know.
Nope, we look good right now.
Please do ask in these next few minutes. In the meantime, I'm going to put these links out there as well. And Erica or Emily, if you have any comments, let me know.
Thanks so much, Victor. I did go ahead and launch a poll as well for our attendees with a couple of questions about your use of GitLab and whether you use containers. We're always really interested in hearing more about our audience. But I will go ahead and drop these links as well into the chat. And as Victor mentioned, you will have a couple more minutes if you want to submit your questions. Otherwise, we'll wrap up a couple minutes early.
Thank you, Emily. And members of the audience, as you maybe still think about questions or comments, by all means, let us know how we're doing. These presentations, these demonstrations are for you. We are delighted to do them, and we're delighted to modify, to add, or take away anything that you find valuable or that you don't find valuable.
Like we have a question here that says, can you be quick on canary development handling using GitLab once again?
Erica, repeat the question. I think I heard, can you be quick?
Yes, can you be quick on canary development handling when using GitLab once again?
I think they just wanted a quick wrap up of how you went about using Canary. So if you want to just do a very quick overview of that flow, that might be, I think that'll address the question.
Certainly. Let's go back here and let's go to environments. With Canary, basically what we're doing, everything that we did today, building, well, I'm calling it building. It was making that very simple code change. Having done that code change, as you saw from my configuration file, from my CI from a CI definition. I had some stages and some phases for testing. So before pushing to Canary, we would have all that assurance that everything was working well, that our automated testing went well, that from the staging environment perspective, that our QA teams did the due diligence, all code approvals were met. And with Canary, we are just doing that one final extra step of really of due diligence. And with that Canary environment, we're able to make that code available, that new app available to our customers, so that any feedback that comes from the usage of that application comes back to us quickly. If the feedback would be negative in a Canary environment, then we can certainly revert back to the previous version of production, or simply kill the Canary pod, in which case the original production pod remains in place, and we go back to, so to speak, to the drawing board, where we address any issues that were found in the Canary and go back to the flow once again. So Canary is that one safeguard. Thinking to the Canary in the mine illustration, it allows us to ensure that what we have out there is working as expected. Erica, Lee, let me know if that was useful and helpful, and if it addressed the question from the audience.
Yep, I think you did. I think you did a good job there.
Thank you very much. Excellent.
Awesome. So I will go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. I will just briefly chat some of those other links, if I can grab them for you. One moment. Okay, so we'd love to invite you to take out a free trial of GitLab for the enterprise. We hope you're excited to see what your team can do with it. We always are. You can also check out the full product roadmap that we mentioned. Oops, I'm sorry, one moment, please. Looks like I was chatting that only to my fellow panelists, so I'll try that again. There's our direction page, and here is our link to a free trial. You can also learn more about GitLab's enterprise features at this link. And you can reach out to our sales team for a personalized demo. And that is all for me. Thank you all so much for attending. We hope to see you on future webcasts. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Emily, Erica, Lee. Thank you very much. I look forward to doing this again.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for joining.